Hello, my sweet little ducklings, and welcome to the eighth and final episode of Language Learning for Pretty Birds. In this series, we've discussed a lot about how the brain processes language and what you can do about it. To wrap up, I'll be talking about what that looks like over the long haul so that you can set your expectations and hopefully enjoy the journey more than you're frustrated by it. So, let's go. Starting with the pyramid. The dweebs in my field use an inverted pyramid to illustrate the progression of competence in language. And some organizations that do testing and certification use this to designate proficiency as well. The idea behind this image is that progress generally slows down as you advance. Now, that's a simplification, of course. Learning anything isn't just a straight line from rank novice to master, but it is a general trend you want to anticipate. The biggest strides necessarily come at the beginning. Going from knowing absolutely nothing to knowing anything at all happens immediately. And that first step will be the largest jump in progress you will ever make. Over the next few weeks of being a beginner, you'll be learning and developing a lot of skills, and with consistent work, you can expect to advance pretty rapidly. But eventually, that starts to get disrupted. Things you could do a few weeks ago suddenly elude you. Your studies slow down and feel more complicated. You're not just learning skill after skill, grammar point after grammar point, and adding it to your repertoire anymore. What gives? Well, congratulations, baby! You're becoming intermediate. I'm going to focus primarily on intermediate learners for a few reasons. First, because you'll spend most of your time as an intermediate in any skill, so you'll want to get comfortable with what that feels like. Second, because the cognitive demands of intermediates are probably the most complex and need the most attention. And third, because they don't typically get that kind of attention. We make a big fuss over beginners, of course, and revere mastery when we see it or attain it. But the majority of people, the majority of the time, are hanging out somewhere in the middle being sorely neglected. I love intermediates. I have to confess that while teaching Italian 1, those first baby steps is an enormous privilege. I have a huge soft spot for Italian 2 and actually find it the most interesting level to teach. The hallmark of intermediate skill level is inconsistency. You can do something, say use the present perfect tense, under certain circumstances, but flub it under others. That's why language assessments, if they're properly constructed, will provide ducklings with the scaffolding they need to produce it. A good assessment tests their knowledge of forms and structures without penalizing their ability to spontaneously produce them, or, if that's the task, takes that challenge into account and grades accordingly. Know that with time and effort expended in methods that work with your brain rather than against it, you will attain that consistency. Being intermediate can also be confusing. There are a few phenomena that contribute to this, and I have a few well-worn pep talks and pointers I use to encourage ducklings through this stage. First, the apartment analogy. You have moved into a new apartment, and while it's been a lot of work getting everything furnished, you are starting with more or less a blank slate. That's the beginner stage. You just bring stuff in and set it up. But if you add new pieces of furniture or other stuff after you've set up housekeeping, you have to start rearranging the stuff you already have to make it fit. As you learn new grammar structures, it will mess with the stuff you already know to some extent. Remember hypercorrection from last episode? There are a lot of little cognitive processes like that. But eventually you'll get everything out of boxes and arranged nicely. You'll see. Incidentally, this is where the learning curve can differ wildly depending on how close or distant the target language is from a language you already speak. For example, it is true that having Spanish makes Italian easier. But at the beginning, it can be a struggle for native Spanish speakers to maintain distinction between the more subtle differences in the sister languages. But by the intermediate stage, they're flying. This is normal. Next, sometimes progress feels like regression. To show you why, I get to talk about the great love of my life again, Argentine tango. You have been dancing tango for some months and notice that your posture is suffering. You used to be able to keep your shoulders down when you danced, but I've noticed them creeping up more and more lately. What gives? Well, there are a couple reasons why this might be the case, and both of them actually indicate that you're making progress. One is that you're just having to keep track of more now. You have more steps in your repertoire, more balls in the air to juggle. So, if keeping that dance posture wasn't already fully automatized and required any level of conscious attention to maintain, that attention is now being taken up by ganchos, barridas, castigadas, or the multi-hooked serpentine involvement of the polpo. My God, I miss tango. As you continue to work, you will automatize all of this to the point where you free up enough working memory to attend only to the music and your partner because your body can already read and write without conscious effort. It is a lovely feeling in any skill and one I wish for you. But you gotta go through a lot of this to get there. Another reason you might notice that you're losing integrity in your posture is that you are freeing up space in your working memory by automatizing the simpler steps that you started out with. The truth is, your shoulders were always a little hunched, but as a beginner, you were completely focused on getting your embrace, your steps, your pivots, and crosses to notice. Now that you can do those fundamentals without as much conscious effort, you have enough working memory to notice an issue with your posture that was always there. Remember that perception outpaces production, and so does perception of your own habits and issues. You're not backsliding, you're actually getting better. This is normal. In the intermediate stage of language learning, you're still doing a lot of work on explicit grammar instruction because you don't know all the structures yet. But the processing work that dominates study as an advanced duckling is starting to kick in more and more. Your brain is doing a ton of work in this transitional phase. The explicit study of the beginner, and increasingly, the Milonga mode fluency work of advancement. Be kind to yourself. Or if you can't bring yourself to be, know that I'm out here being kind to you. Next, we have advanced learners. Once you have all your grammar structures under your belt, you'll start to transition into the advanced stage. That means most of your study will be in Milonga mode, getting enough input to make it all gel. The only thing you really need to be working on explicitly is learning new vocabulary, aside from occasional brushing up of grammar you want to work on, or accent training if that's of interest to you. But the thing about progress in a second language is that adults differ from one another in ways that babies usually just don't. Typically developing babies have predictable stages with predictable time frames and acquire their first languages in roughly the same order of acquisition. Adults have a first language or languages already. They also have things like jobs, families, shitty commutes, health problems, and a million other things that affect their language studies. And the studies themselves can vary wildly. Everything from Duolingo to a night class to independent study with books and videos to immersion. So it's hard for me, at least, to define what progress in mastery looks like. It looks like a lot of different things, and it's usually the case for someone's abilities to be very uneven. For example, I've been teaching Italian 1 for so many years that, for lack of upkeep, I'm getting a bit rusty on things like the conditional mood that we don't cover. My accent is not perfect, but it's decent. On the other hand, my listening comprehension has always been hampered by an audio processing disorder, and my vocabulary is all over the place. Getting a master's in lit means I know words like superstructure, but not button. So, am I advanced? I don't know, man, I guess. My Italian functions for exactly what I need it to do. It nurtures new beginners and lets me earn my crust of bread while I do it. It makes going to the opera much more fun. It makes me feel very fancy and elegant. And it gives me a model of skill acquisition that lets me share my actual avocation, which isn't so much Italian as it is learning itself. My Italian is a vehicle that lets me teach other people how to learn whatever they want. The end. Or is it? Well, To summarize this series, what should you do to learn a language? You should set functional goals, memorize your structures, focusing on form, get sufficient comprehensible input, work at the edges of your ability, and most of all, be consistent and have fun. This is a lifelong process. You're never done. I've presented you the theory and advice you need to master language, and it broadly applies to skill building in general. But you're never really finished learning a language, so my last piece of advice to you is find a method that you enjoy enough to do every day. A 10-minute walk you take is better than a 2-hour workout you don't do. So don't optimize the fun out of learning. Well, my darling ducklings, this has been such a fun summer project, and I want to thank all of you who've been watching and learning. It makes me so happy to be able to share all of this with you. I mean that. The education I received is a priceless gift I can never truly pay back, and having anything I can contribute to my community is likewise a precious gift. I hope you had as much fun with these as I did and that you got something helpful from it. So, with all my heart, thank you. Here's my reference from the day, the Actful Proficiency Scale. As ever, thanks to the lovely people who designed these beautiful PowerPoint slides. Hit me up on Discord if you need me. I mean that. And I'll see you in class.